You are aware of the coolness first, even before you open your eyes. The air rests against your face with a particular weight, a dry and gentle presence that carries the memory of the night. It is the hour when the desert holds its breath, waiting for the sun. You lie still for a moment, listening to the silence that is never complete, threaded through with the soft exhalations of camels and the distant rustle of palm fronds high above the oasis. The mat beneath you is woven from old fibers, and you can feel the pattern of its braids pressing into your shoulder through the thin fabric of your cloak. You open your eyes and see the sky still deep with stars, though a faint suggestion of grey touches the eastern edge. You push aside your blanket, a length of coarse wool that smells of lanolin and dust, and you sit up slowly. The sand that drifted into the folds of your clothing during the night falls away in tiny cascades, each grain catching the starlight for an instant. Your body knows this ritual. You do not rush, because the desert teaches you that haste cracks water skins and unsettles animals. You draw a deep breath and taste the air, finding the faint green scent of the oasis pond mixed with the mineral dryness of the surrounding sands. The date palms behind you stand in silent rows, their fronds hanging motionless in the stillness. A few small birds, still asleep, remain hidden among the thatch of old leaves, offering no sound. You reach for your waterskin, a goatskin that you filled the evening before at the spring. Its surface is cool and slightly tacky under your fingertips from the moisture seeping through the pores. You uncork it and pour a small amount of water into a wooden cup, the sound a quiet trickle that seems very loud in the pre-dawn hush. You drink slowly, letting the water rest in your mouth to take the chill off it before swallowing. The wetness travels down your throat and settles in your stomach, a faint, cool line that anchors you to the waking world. You replace the cup and secure the stopper, then you rise to your feet with the same patient economy of motion that you use in all things. The sand beneath your bare feet is fine and cold, packed down by the weight of the camp, but still yielding slightly with each step. You walk toward the cluster of resting camels, their shapes dark and mountainous in the gloom. They are couched in a loose circle, legs folded under them, necks stretched out along the ground or curled back in that peculiar resting posture of their kind. You approach the nearest one, your lead camel, and he turns his head toward you with a low, grumbling sound that rumbles through his chest. His breath steams faintly in the cool air, smelling of cud and dried grasses. You place your palm on his broad forehead, feeling the coarse hair and the solid bone beneath, and you stand with him for a while, sharing the quiet. You move among the other camels, checking each one. You run your hands along their flanks, feeling for any sign of heat or swelling, and you lift their feet one by one to inspect the tough pads. The pads are cool and smooth, still holding the shape of the ground they rested on. You find a small pebble lodged in the crevice of one animal's foot, and you pry it out with your thumb, tossing it aside into the darkness. The camel snorts softly and shifts its weight, then settles back into stillness. You speak a few words to it, not sentences with meaning, but a low rhythmic murmur that the animal understands through its bones, and you move on. After checking the camels, you turn your attention to the loads. The packs are stacked neatly beside the kneeling animals, covered with lengths of heavy fabric to keep off the dew. You pull back the first cover, and the scent of dates rises up, sweet and dense, a concentrated aroma that seems almost warm in the cold air. The dates are packed into woven baskets lined with cloth, and you check the bindings, running your fingers along the twisted palm fiber ropes that hold the lid secure. The knots are tight, the weave unbroken. You press down on the baskets, and they do not shift, their weight settled and reliable. You cover them again and move to the next stack, where the water skins for the journey rest in a row. You count them silently, touching each one, noting the plumpness that indicates full contents. The leather is smooth and firm, the stitching intact along the seams. Nothing has shifted during the night. Beyond the water skins you have the trade bundles, long rolls of fabric and small clay jars sealed with wax, and these too you examine with slow care. The fabric is rough under your hands, its edges fraying just slightly where the weave has loosened after many journeys. The jars are cool and heavy, their shapes familiar. You can identify the contents by the slight sound each makes when tapped with a fingernail, the dull thud of thick oil, the higher ring of dried herbs packed tight. You make a mental note of each one, not because you expect anything to be wrong, but because the act of checking is itself a form of settling your mind. The routine builds a kind of quiet certainty, layer by layer, like the rising of the light. The sky has been changing while you worked. The stars that were bright overhead have begun to pale, and the deep black of the zenith is now a velvety blue. In the east, the grey is turned to a soft band of pearl that grows wider with each slow breath. The air remains cool, but you know this will change quickly once the first ray of sun touches the sand. You return to your sleeping mat and begin to fold your blanket, aligning the edges carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles with a slow, deliberate motion of your palms. The fabric is heavy, and it holds the shape of your body. You smooth it away until the blanket is a neat rectangle, which you roll tightly and tie with a leather cord. You place it beside your pack and begin to dress for the day's travel. You take your headscarf from where it hung on a low palm branch and shake out the dust. The cloth is a length of cotton, undyed, the color of pale sand. You fold it into a triangle and drape it over your head, leaving the ends hanging loose for now. Then you pick up the agao, the doubled black cord that will secure the scarf in place. You fit it around the crown of your head, adjusting it until the pressure is even and firm. The wool of the agao is slightly rough, and you can feel its twisted strands against your scalp through the cotton. You pull one end of the scarf across your mouth and let it rest there, ready to be lifted at need. The fabric smells of your own skin and the dust of many miles, a smell so familiar that it feels like home. You put on your outer cloak next, a heavier garment of brown wool with wide sleeves. The weight settles onto your shoulders with a comforting pressure, and you fasten the single toggle at the neck, a piece of carved bone worn smooth by years of use. The cloak falls to your ankles, leaving your legs free to walk, and you make sure the folds are arranged so that your arms can move easily. You slip your feet into your sandals, simple soles of cured leather with straps that wrap around your heels and ankles. The leather is stiff with age, but pliable enough to bend with your foot, and you tighten the straps with a practiced tug. Now you are ready, and you stand for a moment looking out at the desert beyond the oasis. The world outside the ring of palms is a vast expanse of low dunes and gravel plains, still cloaked in shadow. You can just make out the path you will take, a faint track that curves northward around a long ridge of weathered rock. The sand is a uniform grey in the twilight, rippled by the wind into patterns that shift from day to day. Even as you watch, the first direct light touches the crest of the tallest dune, turning it briefly pink, then pale gold. The color spreads downward like water soaking into cloth, until the whole slope glows with a soft radiance that feels almost warm even at a distance. The air begins to move, a slight breeze that stirs the sand and carries the scent of dry earth and distant mountains. You close your eyes for a moment and let the light touch your eyelids, feeling the gentle heat begin to lift the coolness from your skin. Behind you, the camp is beginning to stir. You hear a cough, the low murmur of voices, the clank of a cooking pot. Someone builds up a small fire from dried palm ribs, and the smoke rises straight up in the windless air, a thin grey column that smells of resin and ash. You walk over to the fire and accept a cup of strong black tea from a fellow traveller, a man whose face is as lined as your own. The tea is hot and bitter, and you drink it standing up, looking back toward the camels you have already checked. No words are exchanged beyond a simple greeting, a nod, the quiet understanding of people who have travelled together before. The tea warms you from the inside out, and you place the empty cup back on the ground beside the fire. You go to the lead camel again and begin to fit his harness. The saddle pad comes first, a thick rectangle of woven wool that you place over the hump, smoothing it down so that it sits evenly. Then you lift the saddle itself, a wooden frame shaped like an inverted V, its surfaces polished by countless hours of friction. The camel grumbles, but does not rise. He knows the routine. You settle the saddle in place and draw the girth straps underneath his belly, pulling them snug but not tight, checking that no folds of skin are pinched. The leather creaks softly as you work, a sound that blends with the waking calls of birds now beginning in the palm trees. You attach the lead rope to the halter, a length of braided goat hair that feels slightly oily to the touch, and you coil the rest of it neatly in your hand. Now you load the gear. You lift the water skins first, hanging them over the saddle horns so that their weight is balanced on each side, their wooden stoppers pointing upward. You secure them with leather ties, double knotting each one. Then you step back to confirm they hang evenly. The date baskets come next. You place them in pairs, one on each side, and you lash them to the saddle frame with the same palm fiber rope, weaving a pattern of crisscross lines that locks everything in place. Your hands move automatically, following a sequence you learned as a youth and have performed thousands of times since. The rope goes over, under, around, and through, each move building upon the last until the load is a single unit that will not shift. You pull the final knot tight and tuck the loose end under a strap. You load the remaining camels in the same way, working down the line. Each animal has its own temperament. You adjust the girths more loosely on one that dislikes pressure. You speak a few extra words to another that always fidgets. The camel men working alongside you do the same, their movements slow and rhythmic, their shadows now long and distinct on the sand. The sun has cleared the horizon fully, a perfect golden dome that seems to float above the dunes, and the whole oasis is bathed in a clear, warm light. The palm fronds catch the rays and turn a brilliant green, and the water of the pond glints like a sheet of tin. You pause to look at the scene and take a long breath, letting the beauty of it settle into you without needing to name it. Before you depart, you walk to the edge of the pond for one last drink. You kneel in the damp sand where the grains are darker and cling together, and you cup your hands into the water. The water is cool, but not cold, and you drink deeply this time, knowing that the next source is a day's journey away. The water tastes slightly of earth and of the roots that line the pond, a keen taste that has no sharpness. You splash a little onto your face and the back of your neck, feeling it trickle down under your collar and dampen the edge of your scarf. The droplets cling to your eyelashes and blur the world for a moment before you blink them away. Then you rise and wipe your hands on your cloak and walk back to the caravan. Everything is ready. The camels are loaded, their harnesses snug and their feet clean. The water skins are full. The date baskets are tied down. Your blanket is rolled, your sandals are secure, your headscarf is in place. You stand at the head of the line with the lead rope in your hand and look out at the path ahead. A ribbon of pale sand that winds among the dunes and disappears into the shimmering distance. The other travelers take their positions, and the camels shift their weight from foot to foot, eager to be moving now that the sun is up. You feel the familiar sensation of the journey about to begin, a quiet pull in your chest that is not excitement, but something closer to patience. You wait until the camp is fully broken, and then you take the first slow step onto the track, the sand pressing under your sandal, the day opening before you like a long, calm exhale. The first step takes you from the packed sand of the camp onto the open track, and the ground changes immediately under your foot. The surface here is softer, a layer of fine grains that shifts with a faint sighing sound as your weight settles. You pause for a single breath, adjusting to the feel of the journey beginning. Then you take the next step, and the next. The lead rope hangs from your hand with a familiar slackness, its rough fibers resting against your palm and between your fingers. Behind you, the lead camel lifts his head and follows without any signal, his great padded feet pressing into the sand with a slow, measured rhythm that you know as well as your own heartbeat. The caravan begins to move as one body. You hear the soft groan of leather as the other camels rise in sequence and fall into line, the muted jingle of harness rings, and the whisper of sand against sand. No one speaks. The hour before full dawn carries its own kind of quiet that does not need words. Your own footsteps are nearly silent, just a faint crunch and release, a sound that blends with the immense stillness of the desert. You glance up and see that the sky has continued its slow transformation. The pearl-grey band in the east, now edged with a thread of pale orange that seems to melt into the blue-black of the retreating night. You walk with an unhurried stride, a pace you could hold from sunrise to sunset without exhaustion. Your body knows this rhythm, the way your weight rolls from heel to toe, the way your arms swing just enough to keep balance without wasting energy. The wool of your cloak brushes against your calves with a soft, repetitive whisper, and the hem of your headscarf lifts slightly in the air that moves with your motion. The sand ahead of you is untouched except for the faint trace of the track itself, which is not really a path, but a subtle indentation in the surface, a memory of all the caravans that have passed this way before. The light continues to change. The thread of orange broadens into a band that stretches across the horizon, and the desert begins to reveal its shapes. Low dunes rise on either side, their contours soft and rounded, their surfaces marked with the rippling patterns left by yesterday's wind. The ripples run in long, parallel lines that curve gently around the base of each dune, never crossing, always following some patient logic of their own. The sand is still grey in the shadows, but on the east-facing slopes it catches the first direct light and turns the colour of pale honey. You look at these familiar colours without naming them, letting them simply be part of the world you are moving through. Your lead camel walks with his head swaying gently from side to side, each step a slow, deliberate placement of a foot, then a pause, then the next foot. The motion travels through the rope into your hand like a faint pulse, a steady rhythm that matches your own breathing. You listen to the creak of his saddle, a sound that comes and goes with each stride, never exactly the same twice, but always within a narrow range of pitch. Behind him, the other camels follow in a line, and you can hear the overlapping chorus of their movements, the soft clop of pads on sand, the occasional grunt, the delicate clatter of the wooden beads that hang from one animal's halter. The beads click together when he tosses his head, a sound like small stones falling into water. The air remains cool, but you can feel the first hint of the warmth that will come later. It is a subtle change, not yet a temperature, but a kind of promise on the breeze that touches your face. The breeze itself is very light, just enough to lift the loose edge of your scarf and to carry the dry, clean scent of the open desert. This scent is different from the oasis smell of damp earth and palms. It is thinner, sharper, composed of sun-baked stone and ancient dust. You breathe it in deeply, letting it fill your lungs, and the coolness of it wakes you fully from any remnant of sleep. You walk and you listen, and the sounds of the caravan become a kind of music that requires no attention. The creak of leather, the jingle of brass, the soft snorting of the camels, the muffled tread of feet on sand, they all blend into a single steady wash of noise that is almost like silence. Underneath it all is the deeper silence of the desert itself, a vast and patient emptiness that absorbs every sound without echo. There are no birds here, no insects humming, nothing but the caravan and the sand and the slowly brightening sky. You let your mind settle into this quiet, not thinking about anything in particular, just observing the small details of the journey as they pass. The sun rises, and the moment of its full emergence is a slow event that takes many minutes. A sliver of gold appears at the horizon, so bright that you cannot look directly at it, and then it grows into a dome and then a perfect circle that seems to lift itself free of the earth. The light spills across the desert in a wave, chasing the shadows down the western slopes of the dunes and turning the whole landscape into a field of warm gold. Your own shadow appears suddenly, stretched out long and thin behind you, moving in perfect time with your steps. You turn your head just enough to see the line of camels, their shadows equally long and thin, a caravan of dark shapes that seems to move on the surface of the sand like a reflection in water. The first direct warmth touches your shoulders, a gentle pressure of heat that sinks through the wool of your cloak and spreads across your skin. You feel it on your neck, where the scarf has shifted slightly, a pleasant sensation after the coolness of the night. You do not adjust your clothing yet. The warmth is still mild, and you know it will grow much stronger before you seek shade. The camels also seem to feel the change, and they lift their heads a little higher, their nostrils flaring as they sample the warming air. One of them makes a low, rumbling sound deep in its throat, a sound of contentment or simple recognition, and the others answer with similar murmurs that travel down the line like a conversation in a language you partly understand. The track leads you past a place where the sand gives way to a harder surface, a flat stretch of compacted gravel that is the color of old iron. The sound of your footsteps changes from a soft crush to a sharper click, and the camel's pads make a different noise here, a kind of dull tapping that resonates briefly. You welcome this section because it allows the caravan to spread out slightly. The animals no longer need to walk in single file on the soft shoulder of a dune, and you can see them all from the corner of your eye, a long line of brown and tan shapes moving steadily across the plain. The gravel is studded with small stones worn smooth by wind and time, and they catch the low-angle sunlight and sparkle faintly as you pass. You have walked this route many times, and your body knows the distance without counting steps. You recognize the slight rise ahead where the gravel plain ends and the sand resumes, and you know that beyond that rise, the view will open up to a broad valley of dunes. You feel no urgency to reach it, no desire to hurry. The journey itself is the point. The arrival will come in its own time. You let your gaze drift across the landscape, noting the familiar shapes without focusing on them too closely. A particular rock formation, a low ridge that looks like the back of a sleeping animal, marks the halfway point to the next oasis, and you can see it clearly now, a dark shape against the pale sand. You will pass near it, but not today. It is many hours still to the west, and you are traveling north. You file its location away in the corner of your mind, a part of the mental map that you carry everywhere. The heat increases by slow degrees. The wool of your cloak is beginning to feel heavier, and the air that touches your face is no longer cool. You reach up with your free hand and adjust the headscarf so that it covers more of your neck, tucking the loose end into the neckline of your cloak. The fabric is already warm from your body, and it settles against your skin with a comfortable familiarity. You pull the front of the scarf across your mouth and nose, not because of dust yet, but because the dry air can pull moisture from your breath if you let it. The cloth will trap some of that moisture and hold it close, keeping your throat from becoming too dry. The camels do not have scarves, but their nostrils are designed for this climate, long slits that can close almost completely, preserving the water in their breath. You watch your lead camel's nostrils flare and contract with each step, a small, constant motion that is part of the rhythm of the caravan. After a time, you stop to adjust a girth strap that has loosened slightly on the second camel. You raise your hand and the whole caravan halts without confusion, the animals standing patiently while you work. You walk back along the line, your sandals pressing into the hot sand that now radiates warmth up through the soles. The second camel turns its head to watch you, its large dark eyes following your movements with a calm, unsurprised expression. You loosen the knot, pull the strap a notch tighter, and retie it, making sure the leather lies flat against the wool of the saddle pad. You pat the camel on its shoulder, feeling the coarse hair and the solid muscle beneath. Then you walk back to the front and pick up the lead rope. You start walking again, and the caravan follows as if it had never stopped. The sun continues to climb, and the shadows shorten. Your shadow is no longer a long, stretched form, but a compact, dark shape that walks close beside you, its edges sharp and distinct. The shadows of the dunes have vanished altogether, and the sand is now a uniform pale gold, almost white in the brightest patches, with no variation in tone except where a faint haze of heat begins to shimmer near the horizon. That shimmer is a thing you watch without alarm. It is simply the desert breathing, the air rising and bending the light. It makes the distant dunes seem to float slightly above the ground, their outlines wavering as if seen through water. You have seen this every day of your traveling life, and it is as ordinary to you as a wall or a door might be to someone who lives in a city. The quiet of the morning has deepened into the heavier stillness of midday. The light breeze has dropped, and the air is now perfectly still, so still that the dust kicked up by the camels hangs in the air behind you for a long moment before settling. You can see the faint trail of your passage stretching back across the plain, a line of disturbed sand and scattered pebbles that will be erased by the next wind. The sounds of the caravan have changed too. The leather no longer creaks as much because the heat has made it more supple, and the wooden beads are silent now, the camel who wears them having settled into a steady, unbroken stride. Only the rhythmic crunch of footsteps remains, a constant background that is so steady it begins to fade from your conscious attention, like the sound of your own breathing. You let your mind wander, not into thoughts but into a kind of open awareness. You notice the way the light falls on a particular ripple of sand, the way a small stone casts a tiny shadow, the way the camel's ears flick occasionally to dislodge a fly that does not exist. You notice the color of the sky, which has paled from the deep blue of morning to a washed-out, milky blue that seems almost white near the sun. You notice the weight of the rope in your hand, the texture of the braided goat hair, the way it has grown slightly warmer from the heat of your palm. All these details pass through you without leaving a mark, and you feel yourself becoming part of the landscape, a moving figure in a vast, still painting. You walk, and the morning passes into early afternoon. The sand ahead stretches on in low, smooth waves that never change their shape, but always offer a slightly different arrangement of light and shadow. There is no end to them, no destination visible yet, only the track that curves around each dune and leads on to the next. You do not think about how far you have come or how far remains. You simply place one foot in front of the other, feeling the sand give and then hold, the rope shift and then steady, the sun press down and then very gradually begin to relent as the day tips past its peak. The caravan follows in its patient line, and the slow, steady journey continues, moment by moment, step by step, into the deep and quiet heart of the afternoon. By the time the sun has climbed to its mid-morning station, the character of the light has changed completely from the soft gold of dawn. It is now a broad, steady whiteness that fills the sky from horizon to horizon, pressing down on the desert with an even pressure that leaves no shadows except those directly underfoot. The blue overhead is paled to a washed-out tint, almost grey at its highest point, and it meets the sand without a single cloud to interrupt the union. You feel the heat beginning to build, not as a sudden wave, but as a gradual thickening of the air itself, a sensation of walking through something slightly denser than what the early hours offered. Your shadow walks beside you now, short and dark, a compact companion that keeps perfect time with your steps, its edges so sharp on the bright sand that they look cut from cloth. You adjust your head covering with a slow, practiced motion. The fabric has loosened a little during the morning's trek, and you pull the front edge further across your brow so that it shields your eyes from the direct glare, letting you see the path ahead through a narrow band of shade. The cloth is warm but not uncomfortable, carrying the accumulated heat of your body, and it smells faintly of the tea you drank at dawn and the dust of the oasis. You retuck the loose end under the neck of your cloak and feel the fabric settle against your collarbone, a familiar pressure that signals the serious part of the day has begun. The camels need no such adjustments. Their long lashes already filter the brightness, and their steady pace never falters. The caravan has fallen into a rhythm so deep and predictable that it seems to breathe on its own. The soft thump of camel pads on sand, a sound somewhere between a scuff and a whisper, repeats with each step, layer upon layer, until it forms a continuous low percussion that your ears accept as silence. Between those thumps, you hear the occasional jingle of a bridle ring, a small brass note that chimes once and then fades, and the quiet exhale of the animals as they blow warm air through their nostrils in a slow, patient cadence. The wooden beads that rattled earlier are silent now, the camel who carries them having settled into a trance-like stride that makes no unnecessary movement. Even the creak of the leather saddles has softened as the heat oils the fibers, reducing friction to a gentle, intermittent sigh. You walk, and as you walk you notice that the landscape is beginning to offer subtle variations. The low dunes of the earlier track have given way to a flatter expanse where the sand is interrupted by outcroppings of ancient rock. One such ridge rises on your left, a long spine of dark stone that the wind has sculpted into smooth hollows and curves. The hollows are shallow caves, really, their interiors shadowed in deep ochre, their edges worn round by centuries of grit and breeze. You register this landmark without breaking stride, filing it away in the mental map you carry, knowing that it will serve as a signpost on future journeys. The ridge slides past slowly, its form changing from a sharp silhouette to a rounded hump as your perspective shifts, until it finally merges with the general haze of the distance. The sand underfoot changes too. It is moved from the soft, powdery consistency of the early morning to a firmer crust that holds your footprints with surprising clarity. Each step leaves a distinct impression, the pattern of your sandal sole pressed into the surface as if stamped in clay, and when you glance back, you see the entire caravan's track stretching behind you like a line of writing. The camel's pads leave broad, round marks with the faint outline of their toes, and the trail is so neat and unbroken that you could follow it back all the way to the oasis in perfect safety. This firm sand makes the walking easier, allowing you to move with even less effort, and you feel your pace settling into a kind of floating rhythm, a continuous flow that seems to carry you forward without any conscious will. You reach for the water skin that hangs at your side, a smaller one kept for drinking during the march, and you uncork it without stopping. The stopper comes out with a soft pop, and you raise the skin to your lips, tilting it just enough to release a small amount of liquid. You do not gulp. You let the water flow into your mouth and rest there, warming it before you swallow, because cold water taken too quickly can shock a warm stomach. The moisture spreads across your tongue and you taste the faint leatheriness of the skin, a flavor as familiar as the sand itself. You swallow slowly, feeling the cool line descend, and then you take one more small sip before replacing the stopper and hanging the skin back at your side. The whole action takes perhaps a minute, and the caravan does not slow. The heat now is a constant presence, a weight that presses down from above and rises from below at the same time. The sun is not yet at its peak, that will come later, but it has climbed high enough to erase almost every shadow except the small dark pools beneath the camels' bellies. The sand radiates warmth upward in shimmering waves that make the horizon quiver, and the distant dunes seem to dance very slightly, their outlines never quite still. You find that if you look at them directly, they steady, but in your peripheral vision they always move, a trick of the air that you have long since stopped questioning. You pull your scarf a little higher over your nose, more from habit than need, because the air is still clean and the dust has not yet risen. The sounds of the caravan continue their steady pattern, and you let your attention drift among them. The soft thump of the camel's feet, steady as a heartbeat. The jingle of a bridle ring from the third animal back, which always makes that sound because its halter is slightly looser than the others. The quiet exhale of your led camel, a rhythmic huff that comes every fourth step, exactly on the beat. A faint squeak from the leather of your own sandal strap, only audible when you step on a particularly hard patch of ground. All these small noises weave together into a fabric of sound that is as unchanging as the desert itself, and within that fabric your mind finds a kind of rest. You are not asleep, but neither are you fully alert. You're in a state between, a watchful quiet that requires no thought. The ridge of rock that you passed has fallen behind now, and ahead of you the desert opens into a broad, shallow valley that stretches for miles. The valley floor is a mix of firm crust and patches of softer sand, and you steer the caravan slightly to the left to avoid a deeper drift that you can see piling against a low dune. The track here is almost invisible, just a slight variation in the color of the surface that you read without having to think about it. You know that the soft patches can be tiring for the camels, making them sink a little with each step, so you keep to the firmer ground where the walking is easier. The camels seem to appreciate this, and they follow your lead with the same uncomplaining steadiness that they have shown all morning. As you cross the valley, the silence deepens. The air is so still now that even the faint breeze of the early morning has vanished entirely, leaving a complete calm that amplifies every small sound. You can hear the grains of sand shifting under your own weight, a sound like very fine paper being rubbed together. You can hear your own breathing, slow and even, the air passing through the cloth of your scarf with a faint hush. You can hear the lead camel's stomach rumble once, a low, gurgling note that sounds like water moving through a deep pipe. These isolated sounds rise up and then fall back into the great, encompassing quiet, and you feel yourself becoming smaller and smaller against the vastness of the valley, a tiny moving point in a landscape that has no end. The sun climbs higher still, and the shadow that walks beside you shrinks further until it is just a dark puddle at your feet. The heat intensifies, and you feel a bead of sweat form at your temple and roll slowly down the side of your face, tracing a cool line through the accumulated dust. You do not wipe it away, it will dry soon enough in the arid air. You notice that the camels are beginning to glisten slightly along their necks, a faint sheen of moisture that evaporates almost as quickly as it appears. They do not pant like other animals. Instead, their breathing remains slow and deep, their bodies conserving every possible drop of water. You respect this quality in them, this perfect adaptation to the world you share. You come to a place where the sand changes texture again, becoming a fine, loose powder that shifts underfoot like dry flour. Walking through it requires a slight adjustment, a lifting of the feet rather than a sliding step, and you make this adjustment without breaking your overall rhythm. The camels do the same, their wide pads spreading to prevent them from sinking too deeply. The powder is so light that it puffs up around your ankles with each footfall, coating your sandals and the hem of your cloak with a fine, pale dust. You watch the puffs rise and settle, a slow, hypnotic motion that continues for the length of the powder patch, which takes perhaps 20 minutes to cross. During this crossing, you focus your attention on the physical sensations of walking. You feel the pull of the lead rope across your palm, the way the twisted goat hair presses into the fleshy base of your thumb. You feel the weight of your cloak on your shoulders, the way the wool drapes and shifts with your movement. You feel the slight ache in your lower back that comes from hours of steady walking, a dull, warm sensation that is not pain, but simply presence. You feel the heat of the sun on the top of your head, filtered through the layers of your scarf, a gentle pressure, like a warm hand resting there. All these sensations flow together into a single, unified experience of being alive in this place at this moment, and you let them flow without grasping at any one of them. The powder patch ends as gradually as it began, and the sand firms up again, allowing you to return to your normal stride. Ahead, the valley begins to rise toward a low crest, the first significant change in elevation since the morning. The climb is so gentle that you barely notice it at first. You simply become aware after a while that your legs are working a little harder and your breath is coming slightly deeper. The camels, too, adjust their pace, taking slightly shorter steps and lowering their heads a fraction. You look up and see that the crest is still some distance away, a pale line against the pale sky, and you know that it will take the better part of an hour to reach it. There is no reason to hurry, and you do not. The morning drifts forward like a very slow breath, each moment indistinguishable from the one before, yet each one slightly different in the small details. The sun moves imperceptibly across the sky. The sand shifts its color from pale gold to a brighter, almost white shade, as the angle of the light changes. The camels' shadows, such as they are, migrate from one side of their bodies to the other. You take another sip of water, even smaller than the first, and you hold it in your mouth for a long time before swallowing. The warmth of the day has become so complete that it feels like a blanket wrapped around you. And within that blanket, you find a strange kind of comfort, a stillness that has nothing to do with rest. You think briefly of the oasis you left behind, the cool water and the green palms, but the thought is distant and without longing. You think of the next oasis, still many hours away, and the thought is equally distant. You are here now, on this track, with these camels, under this sun, and that is the only thing that exists. The past and the future have receded, leaving only the steady rhythm of your footsteps and the patient presence of the caravan. You do not know how long you have been walking. You could measure it by the sun, but you choose not to. You simply walk, and the valley passes around you, and the day continues its slow, silent unfolding. The sun reaches the center of the sky without ceremony, a slow arrival that you feel rather than see, because to look directly upward would be to invite the full force of the light into your eyes. The shadows that have been shrinking all morning have now vanished almost entirely, retreating beneath the camels' bellies and your own feet, until the world is a flat expanse of brightness with no dark places except those you carry with you. Your body registers the hour through a combination of signals, the heaviness in your legs, the dryness in your throat that even the small sips of water have not fully eased, the particular angle of heat on the back of your neck. You know, without consulting any instrument, that it is time to rest. Ahead of you, rising out of the shimmering sand like a dark brush stroke on pale paper, appears the cluster of acacia trees that you have been steering toward since the valley began to climb. They are old trees, their trunks twisted by years of wind and drought, their branches spreading outward in flat, angular patterns that seem to defy the sky. The foliage is thin, a lacework of tiny leaves that casts a dappled rather than a solid shade. But in a landscape where shade is the rarest of commodities, even the slightest interruption of the sun is a gift. The trees stand together in a loose grove, their roots tangled deep underground where they have found a hidden source of moisture, and around their base the sand is slightly darker, held in place by a thin crust of organic matter. You adjust your course by a few degrees, not with any obvious movement, but by leaning your weight very slightly to the left, and the caravan follows the new line as if the camels themselves have also seen the trees and understood the promise they represent. The lead camel lifts his head a little higher, perhaps catching the scent of the acacia blooms, a faint, dusty sweetness that carries on the still air. His pace does not quicken a camel, never hurries without reason, but there is a subtle change in his demeanor, a heightened alertness that communicates itself down the rope and into your hand. You walk the final stretch to the trees with the same steady rhythm you have maintained all morning, allowing the grove to grow slowly larger rather than rushing toward it. When you reach the outer edge of the shade, you stop. The line of camels behind you stops too, the whole caravan halting in sequence, like a long sentence reaching its period. You stand for a moment, letting the transition settle. The air under the trees is noticeably different. It is not cool exactly, but the absence of direct sunlight gives it a quality of relief that your skin recognizes immediately. The light here is greenish, filtered through the tiny leaves, and it moves in shifting patterns as the branches stir in the faintest of breezes, a breeze so slight that you had not felt it out on the open sand. You lower the lead rope and let it rest on the ground, a signal that the march is paused. Now you turn to the led camel and begin the ritual of the midday halt. You place your hand on his shoulder and apply a gentle downward pressure, speaking a quiet word that is less a command than an invitation. The camel responds by folding his front legs, the joints bending with a slow, creaking motion, and then his back legs follow, each one tucking under his body until he is resting on the warm sand with his chest flat and his head still raised. The other camels watch and then do the same, one by one, a cascade of folding limbs and settling bodies that ends with the entire caravan couched in a loose semicircle around the base of the trees. The sound of their descent is a series of soft thuds, and the whisper of sand accepting their weight. You walk among the animals, loosening the girth straps that hold the saddles in place. The buckles are warm from the heat of the camels' bodies, and the leather has become supple and pliable. You pull the straps just enough to release the pressure without removing the saddles entirely, because you will need to reload quickly when the rest period ends, and you check that the saddle pads are sitting evenly on the humps, with no folds or wrinkles that might cause sores. Each camel accepts this attention with its own quiet personality. One closes its eyes and seems to doze immediately. Another turns its head to watch you with a calm, liquid gaze. A third makes a low, rumbling sound of contentment that vibrates through its ribcage. After the girths are loosened, you turn your attention to their feet. You lift each foot in turn, bending the long leg at the knee, so that the pad faces upward, a position the camels yield to without protest. The pads are tough and resilient, but they are not invulnerable, and small stones or thorns can become lodged in the crevices during a long march. You run your thumb across the surface of each pad, feeling for irregularities. On the second camel, you find a tiny pebble, no larger than a date pit, wedged near the edge of the heel, and you work it free with a careful motion, letting it drop into the sand. The pad underneath is unbroken, its surface smooth and cool despite the heat of the ground. You lower the foot gently and move on to the next animal, repeating the same examination with the same slow care. When all the camels have been checked, you gather the water skins that you will need for the halt and carry them to the center of the grove where the shade is deepest. The other travelers have also settled, spreading their mats or simply sitting on the bare sand with their backs against the twisted trunks. No one speaks much. The heat of midday is not a time for conversation. A few quiet words are exchanged about the condition of the animals or the distance yet to go, but mostly the small camp falls into a communal silence, a shared rest that requires no language. You find a spot where two low branches cross to form a natural seat, and you lower yourself onto the sand with a sigh that you did not realize you had been holding. The ground under the acacias is different from the open desert. It is not clean sand, but a mixture of grit, fallen leaves, and the tiny curled seed pods that the trees drop throughout the year. The pods are dry and brown, and they crunch softly when you shift your weight. The leaves that have fallen form a thin, brittle carpet that rustles in the barely perceptible breeze, a sound like very distant rain. You pick up one of the seed pods and examine it without really looking, turning it over in your fingers, feeling its papery texture and the small, hard seeds that rattle inside when you shake it. After a moment, you place it back on the ground and wipe your hands on your cloak. You reach into the pouch at your waist and pull out a handful of dates, the same dates that you packed in the baskets this morning. They are dark and sticky, their skins slightly wrinkled from the sun, and they smell intensely sweet, a concentrated sugar scent that rises in the warm air. You eat them one at a time, chewing slowly, letting the dense flavor fill your mouth before you swallow. The sweetness is almost overwhelming after the dry neutrality of the journey, and it coats your tongue and the roof of your mouth with a pleasant residue. Between dates, you take small sips of water, not much, just enough to soften the fruit and to keep your throat from becoming parched. The water in the skin has grown lukewarm from hanging at your side, but it still tastes clean and faintly of the leather that holds it. The other travelers are eating too, unwrapping flatbreads from cloth bundles, sharing handfuls of dried figs or almonds. A young man near the edge of the shade is carefully pouring water into a shallow wooden bowl for one of the camels, and the animal drinks with long, slow laps of its great tongue, its throat moving in rhythmic swallows. The sight of the drinking camel reminds you of the water still stored in the larger skins, and you make a mental note to check the seals again before you resume the journey. You finish the last date and lick the residue from your fingers, then you lean back against the tree trunk and let your body settle into the stillness. The heat now is at its fullest. The sun is directly above the thin canopy, and its rays find their way through every gap in the leaves, creating a pattern of bright spots on the sand that shifts slowly as the branches move. The air is so thick with warmth that it feels almost solid, a heavy blanket that presses against your skin from all sides. Even in the shade, you can feel the heat radiating upward from the ground, a persistent warmth that seeps through your cloak and your clothing and reaches the muscles of your back and legs. It is not uncomfortable. It is simply the condition of the world at this hour, and you accept it without resistance, allowing your body to grow heavy and still. You notice a small lizard on one of the sunlit branches above your head. It is a pale creature, the color of the sand itself, with tiny scales that catch the light and glitter very slightly when it moves. It has positioned itself on a section of bark that faces the sun directly, and it lies there utterly motionless, its legs splayed out to the sides and its head resting flat against the wood. Only its throat moves, expanding and contracting with quick, shallow breaths that are just visible if you watch closely. The lizard is dozing, or something like dozing, its small body absorbing the heat it needs to survive. You watch the little throat pulse, in and out, a tiny metronome that marks the passage of the midday stillness. After a long time, you stop watching the lizard as a separate creature and simply let its presence become part of the general quiet, a small life sharing the shade with you. Time behaves differently during the halt. It stretches and slows, losing the crisp edges that it had during the morning's march. There are no milestones here, no changing landscapes to measure progress against, only the slow drift of the sun across the tiny gaps in the leaves. You could count your breaths, but you do not. You could watch the shadows of the branches move across the sand, but the movement is so gradual that it barely registers. Instead, you let your mind fall into a state of open, unfocused awareness, a kind of waking rest that is deeper than simple relaxation. Your thoughts, if they can be called thoughts, drift like the acacia leaves in the faint breeze, rising and settling without destination. You become aware of the sounds of the grove, which are different from the sounds of the open desert. There is the rustle of those leaves, a continuous papery whisper that never quite stops. There is the occasional creak of a branch as it rubs against its neighbor, a low, woody groan that sounds almost like a voice. There is the buzz of a small fly that circles your head once and then departs, its flight a thin, high note that fades into the distance. And beneath all of these is the slow, deep breathing of the camels, a sound so low and steady that it merges with the hum of the earth itself. You let these sounds wash over you without naming them, and after a while you notice that your own breathing has slowed to match the camel's rhythm, long and deep and unhurried. The heat continues to press down, and the air shimmers above the sand just beyond the shade. If you look out into the open desert, the world appears to be a lake of molten light, its surface rippling and flowing in slow currents. The dunes in the distance seem to float on this lake, their bases disconnected from the ground, their outlines wavering like reflections in water. The sight is hypnotic, and you watch it for a long time without focusing, your eyes half closed against the glare. You are not sleepy. The rest is too alert for sleep, but you are not fully awake either. You are suspended in the interval, held between the morning that has passed and the afternoon that has not yet begun. At some point, you pour another cup of water and drink it very slowly, feeling the lukewarm liquid move down your throat and spread through your chest. You offer water to the man nearest you, and he accepts with a nod, taking the cup and drinking in the same unhurried way. The cup passes from hand to hand around the small circle, and each person drinks and then passes it on, a silent ritual that binds the group together. When the cup returns to you, it is empty, and you place it back on the sand beside the water skin. No one says thank you. The gesture itself is the thanks. You check the camels once more, rising from your seat with the slow, deliberate motion of someone who has no need to rush. The animals are resting comfortably, their eyes half closed, their jaws moving in the steady, side-to-side motion of cud chewing. You walk down the line and place a hand on each one, feeling the rise and fall of their breathing, the warmth of their hide, the solidity of their bones. They are well, all of them, and you feel a quiet satisfaction in their well-being, a sense of duty fulfilled. You brush a few stray leaves from one camel's saddle, and then return to your spot beneath the tree, settling back against the trunk with a deep, contented exhale. The lizard on the branch has shifted slightly, turning its body to follow a patch of sun that has moved a few inches along the bark. Its eyes are still closed, and its throat still pulses with those tiny, rapid breaths. You watch it for a while longer, and then you close your own eyes and let the darkness behind your eyelids fill with the warm red glow of the sun filtering through skin. You listen to the leaves, the branches, the breathing of the camels, the quiet murmur of a conversation that has started and died away on the other side of the grove. The midday halt continues, stretching outward into the stillness, and you rest at the center of it, patient and still, waiting for nothing, wanting nothing, simply present in the slow, heavy heart of the day. The rest period under the acacia trees ends not with a signal, but with a gradual, unspoken consensus. One by one, the travelers shift in their seats, stretch their legs, and begin to gather the small items they had spread around them during the halt. You feel the change in the air even before anyone moves, a subtle lessening of the heavy stillness that held the grove in its grip. The sun has passed its zenith, and now begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, though it is still many hours from setting. The light filtering through the thin canopy has shifted in color, losing the harsh white of midday and taking on the first hint of amber. It is a soft change, barely perceptible, but your eyes have spent a lifetime reading these variations and they register it automatically. You rise from your seat against the twisted trunk, using the tree for support, as your legs adjust to bearing weight again. The sand that had molded itself to the shape of your body falls away in a small cascade, and you brush the remaining grains from your cloak with a few slow sweeps of your hand. The fabric is warm from your body and from the ground, and it holds the faint, pleasant scent of dried acacia leaves. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling the pull of muscles that have been still for an hour, and then you lower them and walk toward the camels. The animals see you coming, and some of them lift their heads, their large eyes blinking slowly, still drowsy from their own rest. You begin with the lead camel, tightening the girth strap that you loosened when you first arrived. You pull the leather through the buckle, drawing it snug against the saddle pad, and you check that the pad itself has not shifted. The camel grumbles softly, a low vibration that passes through his body and into your hands, but he does not resist. You pat his neck and move down the line, repeating the procedure with each animal. The other camel handlers are doing the same, their movements as slow and careful as yours, and the grove fills with the soft sounds of leather being pulled, buckles clicking into place, and the quiet murmurs of men speaking to their animals. No one raises their voice. The afternoon heat is still too present for loudness. When the camels are ready, you load the small items that had been unpacked for the halt. The water skin you drank from, the cloth that had wrapped your dates, the wooden cup. Everything goes back into its designated place, secured with the same knots you have tied 1,000 times. You check the larger water skins that hang from the saddle horns, confirming that the stoppers are tight and the leather is still damp to the touch, a sign that no leaks have developed. The date baskets are as you left them, their palm fiber ropes taut and unbroken. You run your hand over the loads one final time, feeling the solid, reassuring weight of everything in its proper place, and then you pick up the lead rope. The caravan moves out from the acacia grove in the same order it arrived, with you at the front and the line of camels stretching behind. The transition from shade to sunlight is immediate and sharp. One step you are under the dappled green light of the leaves, and the next you're back in the full, open brilliance of the desert. The heat closes around you again, but it is not the oppressive, pressing weight of midday. It is a slightly gentler warmth, still strong but no longer at its peak, and there is a quality to it that you can only describe as tired, as if the sun itself is beginning to wind down from its highest effort. The sand underfoot is hot through your sandals, but it no longer radiates the fierce, shimmering waves that made the horizon dance. The world is settling, very slowly, into the long decline of afternoon. You walk, and as you walk, you notice the first significant change that the later hour has brought. The shadows have returned. They are not yet long. The sun is still high enough to keep them relatively short, but they exist again, dark shapes that stretch out to the east of every dune and every camel. Your own shadow walks beside you, now on your right instead of your left, a companionable darkness that has grown a little since you last paid attention to it. The camels' shadows are broad and lumpy, exaggerated versions of the animals themselves, their humps and necks distorted into strange flowing shapes that ripple over the uneven sand. You watch these shadows for a while, noting how they change as the ground rises and falls, how they merge together when two camels walk close, how they separate again when the line spreads out. The light itself has begun to shift in color, moving from the pale, washed-out white of midday into a warmer range of tones. The sand, which was almost blindingly bright an hour ago, now shows its deeper shades, ochre and gold and a soft, dusty rose, where the sun strikes at a particular angle. The dunes on your left, the ones facing the afternoon sun, glow with a rich, honeyed radiance that seems to come from within them, while the dunes on your right, already in shadow, have cooled to a muted taupe. The contrast makes the landscape appear deeper and more three-dimensional, as if the desert has suddenly revealed its full topography after hours of flat, shadowless brightness. You take in this transformed beauty without comment, simply letting your eyes rest on it as you walk. The caravan continues at its steady pace, the same unhurried rhythm that has carried you through the morning and will carry you into the evening. The sounds of the march have returned, the soft scuff of camel pads on sand, the creak of leather that has begun to cool slightly and is therefore a little stiffer than it was at noon, the occasional jingle of a halter ring. These sounds are as familiar to you as your own breathing, and they blend into a continuous low-level hum that occupies the back of your mind. You let your attention drift away from them and toward the horizon, where something new has begun to appear. At first it is only a faint suggestion, a slight thickening of the air along the northern edge of the sky. You might not have noticed it if you had not spent so many years reading the desert's smallest signals. It is a discoloration, just barely there, a veil of brownish grey that hangs low over the distant dunes, barely distinguishable from the normal haze of heat. You watch it for a long moment, your stride never faltering, and you file the observation away in the part of your mind that handles navigation and weather. It is too early to say what it means, and there is nothing to be done about it yet, so you simply note its existence and return your attention to the path ahead. The path ahead continues to rise gradually, the shallow valley of the morning giving way to a series of low, rolling dunes that stretch in all directions. The track weaves between them, following the natural contours of the land, and you steer the caravan along its familiar course with small, almost unconscious adjustments of the lead rope. The sand here is loose in places, piled into soft drifts by the winds of previous days, and you give these drifts a wide berth to spare the camels the extra effort of wading through them. The animals seem grateful for this consideration, and they follow your lead with the same placid obedience they have shown all day, the head swaying gently with each step. As the afternoon deepens, the haze on the northern horizon becomes more distinct. It is no longer a mere suggestion, but a definite presence, a band of muted brown that has lifted slightly higher and spread a little wider. The air in that direction looks thicker somehow, as if the sky has been brushed with a dry, dusty wash. The color is the color of old parchment, or of sand that has been ground to an impossibly fine powder and suspended in the atmosphere. You can still see the shapes of the distant dunes through it, but they are softened, their edges blurred, as if you are looking at them through a length of thin, unbleached cloth. The sight is familiar to you, and it brings with it a specific set of considerations that you begin to work through in your calm, methodical way. The haze, you know, is the first sign of moving air far to the north. Somewhere beyond the horizon the wind is stirring, lifting the loose surface of the desert and carrying it upward. It is not a storm yet. It may never become a storm, but it is the kind of condition that can develop into something more substantial as the day cools and the air begins to shift. You feel no alarm at this possibility. You have been through such weather many times, and you know that the desert's moods are as predictable as they are vast. You simply adjust your internal schedule, making space for the possibility of a slower pace or an earlier halt, and you continue walking. The air around you has changed in ways that align with what your eyes are telling you. It feels denser now, heavier in the lungs, and there is a particular dryness to it that goes beyond the normal aridity of the desert. It is a dryness that pulls at the moisture in your nostrils and leaves a faint, powdery taste at the back of your throat. You pull your headscarf a little higher over your nose, not because the dust has arrived yet, but because you know it may arrive soon. And it is easier to adjust your clothing now than to do it later when your hands are occupied. The fabric settles against your face with a familiar pressure, and your breathing becomes slightly more audible to your own ears, a soft hush-hush sound that accompanies each step. The camels have noticed the change as well. Their behavior is still calm, still unhurried, but there is a new attentiveness in the way they hold their heads and the way their ears swivel to catch sounds that you cannot hear. The lead camel, in particular, has angled his body very slightly toward the north, as if he is keeping one eye on the distant haze. You trust the camel's instincts in these matters. They have survived in this desert for far longer than any human lineage, and their bodies are attuned to shifts in pressure and humidity that your own senses cannot detect. You let the lead rope go a little slack, giving the animal the freedom to make his own minor adjustments to the path, and he accepts this freedom without abusing it, staying true to the general direction you have set. The shadows continue to lengthen. What were short, compact shapes an hour ago have now stretched into longer, thinner forms that trail behind each camel like dark carpets being slowly unrolled across the sand. Your own shadow has grown tall again, almost as tall as it was in the early morning, but now it falls to the east instead of the west, a reversal that your body understands, even if your conscious mind does not remark upon it. The light is fully amber now, a warm golden glow that makes the whole desert look like a landscape painted in oils, every dune a brushstroke, every ripple a fine line of shadow. The heat of the day is still present, but it has lost its edge, and the air carries the first faint promise of the coolness that will arrive with sunset. You pause for a moment to let the caravan close up slightly. A gap has opened between the third and fourth camels, and you prefer to keep the line reasonably tight in case the weather changes more quickly than expected. You stand still while the animals catch up, your hand resting lightly on the lead rope, your eyes scanning the northern horizon. The haze has grown again, not dramatically but incrementally, and it now forms a distinct band that stretches across the entire northern sky. The color is deeper too, more brown than gray, and it has a solidity to it that suggests a considerable amount of dust is already airborne. The distant dunes beneath the haze have become difficult to see, their outlines wavering and fading like shapes in a dream. You watch for a full minute, registering the speed of the change, and then you start walking again at a slightly reduced pace. The reduced pace is not a response to any urgent danger. It is simply a practical adjustment, the kind of small recalibration that a guide makes dozens of times during any journey. A slower pace conserves the camel's energy, reduces the amount of dust they kick up, and gives you more time to observe the changing conditions. You settle into this new rhythm as easily as you settled into the old one, your feet finding a cadence that is perhaps half a beat slower than before. The rope in your hands sways with a lazier arc, and your breathing deepens correspondingly. The caravan follows your lead without any sign of confusion or resistance, the camels adjusting their own strides to match your new tempo. The sand, too, has begun to respond to the changing atmosphere. The surface that was firm and crusted under the midday sun is now looser, its particles stirred by the faint currents of air that have begun to flow across the desert floor. These currents are still very weak, barely strong enough to lift a few grains at a time, but they are present, and you can feel them as intermittent, feather-light touches on your ankles and the hem of your cloak. The sand makes a new sound as you walk through it, a soft hiss that accompanies each footfall, like the whisper of a very distant sea. It is a sound that you associate with the onset of wind, and it tells you that the atmosphere is becoming restless, that the stillness of midday has truly passed. The hiss of the sand blends with the other sounds of the caravan to create a slightly different texture of quiet. There is the hiss, and then there is the creak of leather, and then there is the soft grunt of a camel, and then there is the hisses again. The sequence repeats and varies, never exactly the same twice, and you let it wash over you as you walk, a soothing, repetitive pattern that occupies the part of your mind that craves order. The northern horizon continues to darken by slow degrees, and the light continues to shift toward amber and gold, and the afternoon continues to move toward its inevitable conclusion, unhurried and patient and as calm as the breath of the desert itself. The wind arrives as a series of small, tentative gestures, each one barely strong enough to stir the hem of your cloak. It comes from the north, where the haze has now built into a solid wall of muted brown, and it carries with it the first fine particles of dust, grains so small that they are more like a scent than a substance. You feel them as a faint tickling against the exposed skin of your wrists and the narrow band of your forehead that the scarf does not cover, a sensation so light that at first you mistake it for the normal prickle of dry air. But the tickling persists and spreads, and you know that the wind has begun its work. You pull your headscarf across your mouth and nose with a slow, practiced motion, drawing the fabric tight until only your eyes remain visible. The cotton presses against your lips and the bridge of your nose, warm from your breath, and it creates a small private chamber of humid air that soothes the dryness in your throat. The world outside the scarf narrows to what you can see through the gap between the fabric and your brow, a horizontal band of desert, the camels ahead of you, the sky that is slowly losing its golden hue to a paler, milkier tone. Your hearing also changes as the scarf covers your ears, muting the high frequencies so that the sounds of the caravan become softer and more distant, as if you are listening to them through a layer of wool. The camels lower their heads in response to the wind, a collective adjustment that happens without any signal from you. Their necks bow forward and their chins tuck toward their chests, reducing the surface area that the wind can strike. Their long eyelashes, already thick and protective, begin to accumulate a fine coating of pale dust, giving their eyes a frosted appearance that makes them look ancient and wise. The dust gathers in the folds of their ears and along the edges of their nostrils, and their breathing becomes slightly audible, a soft, rhythmic puffing that clears the particles as quickly as they settle. You watch this transformation with quiet approval. The animals are doing exactly what they have evolved to do, and they require no help from you. Your own footsteps have changed as the sand grows looser under the wind's influence. The surface that was firm enough to hold a clear print is now being constantly rearranged, the finest grains lifted and carried a few inches before settling again. Each step you take creates a small cloud of dust that swirls around your ankles and then drifts away to the south, merging with the larger cloud that is beginning to trail behind the entire caravan. You look back once and see that the line of camels is partially obscured by this low-hanging dust, their legs and lower bodies fading into a soft brown blur while their humps and heads remain visible above it. The sight is strange and beautiful, a caravan that seems to float on a sea of moving air. The sounds of the journey have changed along with everything else. The familiar jingle of the halter rings, which has been a constant companion since dawn, is now wrapped in a soft, continuous roar that rises and falls with the gusts. The wind itself has no single voice. It is a composite of many smaller sounds, the hiss of sand grains striking sand, the low hum of air moving across the open desert, the occasional whistle when a stronger gust finds a gap between two dunes. All these sounds blend together into a steady, rushing presence that fills your ears without being loud enough to be uncomfortable. It is the kind of noise that covers other noises, so that the creak of leather and the grunt of the camel seem to come from very far away, even when the animals are only a few paces behind you. You walk a little closer to the lead camel, shortening the lead rope so that your hand rests on the animal's shoulder. The camel's hide is warm and rough under your palm, its coarse hair matted with dust, and you can feel the motion of its stride transmitted directly into your arm. The slow lift of the shoulder as the front leg reaches forward, the slight dip as the weight shifts, the steady, rolling rhythm that has not changed since the morning. The contact is reassuring in a way that requires no thought. It connects you to the animal, and through the animal to the whole caravan, a physical link in a chain that stretches back through the blowing dust. The camel does not react to your touch except by leaning into it very slightly, acknowledging your presence as you acknowledge its. The haze has thickened considerably during the past hour. What began as a faint discoloration on the horizon has now spread to fill the entire northern half of the sky, and it is advancing southward with a slow, inevitable momentum. The sun, which shone with such fierce clarity at midday, has become a pale disk that you can look at directly without squinting, its light diffused by the countless particles suspended in the air. The disk is the color of old ivory, and it casts a strange, even light that seems to come from everywhere at once, eliminating the sharp shadows that were beginning to lengthen just a short while ago. In this light, the desert takes on a muted, almost underwater quality. Its colors flatten to shades of beige and gray, its shapes softened until the edges of the dunes are difficult to distinguish from the sky. The change in the light has a corresponding effect on your sense of distance. The ridge that you have been aiming towards since you first noticed the haze now seems both closer and further away than it did before. Closer because its outline is blurred and therefore appears less distinct. Further because the uniform light makes it difficult to judge how much ground you have covered. You know this ridge well. It is a long, low spine of compacted sand and gravel that rises just high enough to offer a slight windbreak, and its surface is packed hard by centuries of storms that have scoured away the loose grains. You have sheltered near it on previous journeys, and its location is fixed in your mental map with the same certainty as the oasis you left this morning. You steer the caravan toward it now with small, steady corrections, keeping the pale disk of the sun at a particular angle off your right shoulder. The wind continues to strengthen, but it does so in the desert's usual fashion, gradually, almost politely, never in sudden blasts that might startle man or beast. It is a steady, insistent pressure now, rather than a series of tentative puffs, and it pushes against your cloak with enough force to make the fabric billow and snap softly. You turn your body slightly into the wind, presenting a narrower profile, and you adjust your grip on the lead rope so that the camel's shoulder remains under your hand. The sand grains carried by the wind are still very fine. This is not yet a storm of larger particles, but they strike your clothing with a persistent, whispering patter that sounds like very light rain on a tent. The sensation against your skin, where the skin is covered, is a gentle, continuous vibration, as if the air itself has become a kind of fabric brushing against you. The camels plod on without complaint. Their feet, so large and soft, are perfectly suited to this terrain, spreading wide to prevent sinking and lifting cleanly with each step. The dust that coats their eyelashes also coats their legs and bellies, giving them a ghostly uniform appearance, as if they are being slowly painted into the landscape. One of the younger camels, fourth in line, shakes its head suddenly, sending a puff of dust from its ears, and then resumes its steady pace as if nothing had happened. The older animals do not even do that. They simply walk, their heads low, their eyes half closed, their bodies moving with the same patient rhythm that has carried caravans across this desert for thousands of years. You come to a place where the sand gives way to a patch of small, dark stones, and the sound of the caravan changes immediately. The soft hiss of sand is replaced by a sharper, clicking noise as the camel's pads strike the stones, and the wind makes a different sound here too, a lower, more resonant hum as it passes over the irregular surface. The stones are the color of charcoal, warm smooth by wind-blown sand, and they are scattered in a pattern that looks random but is actually the result of a very old riverbed that once flowed across this region. You cross the stone patch in about 10 minutes, and when you reach the other side, the sand resumes. But it is a different kind of sand, coarser, heavier, less prone to being lifted by the wind. This is the sand of the ridge, and its presence tells you that you are close. The ridge itself emerges from the blowing dust like a slow revelation. At first, it is only a slightly darker line against the general greyness, a horizontal shadow that might be a cloud or a trick of the tired eyes. Then, as you draw closer, it resolves into a definite shape, a long, low rise, perhaps the height of 2 men. Its windward face swept clean by the current gusts, its leeward face forming a gentle slope where the sand has accumulated in a series of soft, regular drifts. The color of the ridge is a muted brownish-gray, darker than the surrounding sand, and its surface is textured with the small, parallel grooves that wind carves into compacted earth. It is not a dramatic feature of the landscape, but it is exactly what you need: a shelter, a reference point, a place to wait. You lead the caravan along the windward side of the ridge, staying close to its base where the air is slightly calmer. The ridge itself breaks the force of the wind, creating a narrow zone of reduced speed where the sand falls more slowly and the roar drops to a lower pitch. The camels seem to appreciate this, and they pick up their pace just a little, not enough to break formation, but enough to suggest that they recognize the shelter for what it is. You walk with your hand still on the lead camel's shoulder, feeling the solid, untroubled stride that has not wavered all day, and you let yourself feel a quiet satisfaction that is too mild to be called relief. The world has become a quieter, smaller place. The vast horizons that defined the morning and the early afternoon have been erased, replaced by a circle of visibility that extends only a few hundred paces in any direction. Within this circle, the desert is reduced to its essential elements: sand, wind, the dark shape of the ridge, the line of walking camels, and you at their head. Everything outside the circle is hypothetical, a world of memory and expectation that has no bearing on the present moment. You find that this narrowing of focus is not claustrophobic, but peaceful. It simplifies your responsibilities to a single, manageable task, which is to keep walking until you reach the sheltered spot you have in mind. The sheltered spot is a shallow indentation in the lee of the ridge, a place where the wind has scooped out a low hollow over many seasons. You have used it before, and you know that it provides enough space for the entire caravan to kneel, while remaining protected from the worst of the blowing sand. As you approach it, you begin to slow your pace even further, giving the camels time to adjust, letting the caravan compress into a tighter group. The lead camel seems to recognize the hollow as well. His ears swivel forward and his stride becomes fractionally more purposeful, a subtle change that only someone who has spent years with these animals would notice. You reach the edge of the hollow and stop. The wind is noticeably weaker here, blocked by the bulk of the ridge, and the air is clearer, the dust content reduced enough that you can see the individual grains of sand on the ground rather than a continuous blur. You stand for a moment, listening, and you hear the wind passing overhead, with a sound like water flowing through a deep channel. Below that sound there is the familiar, steady breathing of the camels, the soft rustle of your own clothing, and the quiet beat of your own heart. You lower the lead rope and begin the careful process of settling the caravan into the shelter, moving slowly and deliberately, because there is no hurry now. You have arrived at the place where you will wait, and the waiting itself is simply another form of the journey. You stand at the edge of the hollow for a long moment, letting your eyes adjust to the reduced light and your body to the sudden decrease in wind pressure. The sheltered space before you is perhaps 30 paces across, a natural bowl scooped from the leeward base of the ridge by countless seasons of swirling air. Its floor is smooth and firm, paved with sand that has been packed down by the weight of previous storms, and its walls rise gently on 3 sides to form a shallow amphitheater that faces away from the wind. The ridge itself towers over the hollow, its dark bulk blocking the northern sky entirely, and the sound of the storm passing over its crest is a continuous muted rumble that you feel in your chest as much as you hear it. You step down into the hollow, pulling the lead rope gently so that the first camel follows. The transition from the windy side of the ridge to this protected pocket is immediate and striking. The air here is almost still, moving only in slow, circular eddies that stir the finest dust without lifting it. The temperature feels slightly warmer too, the wind's cooling effect replaced by the insulating presence of the surrounding sand. You walk to the center of the hollow and stop, and the caravan files in behind you, the camels' heads turning left and right, as they register this new environment with quiet curiosity. One of them makes a low, rumbling sound of approval, and the others answer with similar murmurs that echo softly against the walls of the bowl. You begin the process of settling the caravan by turning the led camel in a slow circle, positioning him so that his body will form a windbreak for the others. The animal understands what you want and folds himself down with the same creaking, deliberate motion that you have witnessed a dozen times today. Front legs first, then back legs, his chest settling onto the sand with a soft thud that sends up a small puff of dust. You loosen his girth strap immediately, pulling the leather through the buckle until there is enough slack for him to breathe comfortably, and you check that the saddle pad has not shifted during the descent. The camel closes his eyes and begins to chew, his jaw moving in that slow side-to-side rhythm that indicates contentment, and you pat his neck once before moving to the next animal. The other camels follow the lead camel's example, kneeling one by one as you approach them and signal the command. They arrange themselves in a loose crescent around the center of the hollow, their bodies oriented with their backs to the windward side, their heads pointing inward toward the sheltered space. The youngest camel, the one that shook its head earlier, is the last to kneel, and it does so with a slightly awkward, jerky motion that betrays its inexperience. You help it settle by pressing down on its shoulder, a gentle but firm pressure that it yields to after a brief hesitation. Once it is down, you check its harness with extra care, running your hands along the straps to ensure that nothing is twisted or pinching, and you speak a few quiet words into its ear that are meant to soothe even though the animal cannot understand their meaning. When all the camels are settled, you turn your attention to the loads. The water skins are your first priority, and you move along the line checking each one with the careful, methodical attention that is second nature to you. The skins are still full, their sides plump and firm under your probing fingers, and the stoppers are tight in their necks. You lift each skin slightly, testing its weight, and you run your palm over the stitching that holds the seams together. The leather is cool to the touch, the moisture within keeping it slightly damp even in the dry air, and you find no leaks, no weak points, no signs of wear that might cause trouble later. You secure the ties that hold the skins to the saddles, double knotting any that have worked loose during the march, and then you move on to the date baskets. The baskets are coated with a fine layer of dust, and you brush it away with a few sweeps of your hand before checking the bindings. The palm fiber ropes are still taut, their fibers stretched just enough to hold everything in place without cutting into the basket weave. You press down on each lid, feeling the slight give of the dates packed beneath, and you confirm that the cloth liners are still in position, protecting the fruit from the dust that coats everything else. The trade bundles come next, the rolls of fabric, the sealed clay jars, the small packets of spices and incense wrapped in oiled cloth. You handle each item briefly, noting its condition and its position, building a mental inventory that will allow you to account for everything when the storm passes and it is time to move on. While you work, the other travelers are doing the same, their movements slow and quiet in the grey light of the hollow. One man is shaking the dust from a length of fabric that had come loose from his pack, the cloth snapping softly as it billows and settles. Another is pouring water from a small skin into a wooden bowl, preparing to offer it to the nearest camel. A third is simply sitting on the sand with his back against the ridge, his eyes closed, his breathing deep and even. No one speaks much. The hollow has its own hush, a natural quiet that discourages unnecessary noise. The occasional word is exchanged, a question about a strap, a comment on the storm's intensity, but for the most part the small group works in a companionable silence that has been forged by many days of shared travel. You finish your inspection of the loads and walk to the edge of the hollow where the ground rises to meet the ridge. From this vantage point you can see a little way into the storm, though the visibility is now much reduced. The world outside the shelter is a swirling mass of pale brown, the sand moving in dense clouds that billow and surge like smoke from a vast, slow fire. The wind is strong enough now to lift not just the finest particles, but also the heavier grains, and you can hear them striking the face of the ridge with a sound like handfuls of rice thrown against a wall. The noise is constant, a continuous shushing that rises and falls in volume but never ceases entirely. You watch the storm for a while, noting its direction and its speed, and you conclude that it will likely continue for several hours at least, perhaps into the night. The information settles into your mind without causing any particular reaction. It is simply a fact, like the temperature of the air or the number of camels in the caravan. You return to the center of the hollow and sit down with your back against the lid camel's saddle, a position that has become familiar to you over the years. The camel does not stir. Its breathing is slow and deep, its ribs expanding and contracting in a gentle rhythm that you can feel through the leather of the saddle. You pull your cloak around your body, tucking the edges under your legs to create a cocoon of warmth, and you let your head rest against the polished wood of the saddle frame. The wood is smooth and cool, worn to a soft sheen by countless miles of travel, and it carries the faint, pleasant scent of camel and leather and the dust of many journeys. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the vibration of the wind passing through the ridge, a low, continuous hum that travels through the sand and into your bones. The air in the hollow is hazy but breathable, the dust content low enough that you can pull your scarf down from your face and let your skin breathe. You do this now, unwrapping the fabric with slow, deliberate movements and letting it pool around your neck. The skin of your cheeks and nose is slightly tender from the constant rubbing of the cloth, and the cooler air of the hollow feels pleasant against it. You take a deep breath and taste the familiar mineral dryness of the desert, now mixed with the faint, dusty sweetness of the acacia trees you rested under at midday. The memory of that shade seems very distant now, a part of a different day entirely, even though only a few hours have passed. Time in the desert does not move in straight lines. It folds and stretches, and a morning can feel like a week ago by the time the afternoon wind arrives. You take a small amount of food from the pouch at your waist. It is a piece of flatbread, slightly stale now, but still edible, and you break off a corner and place it in your mouth. The bread is dry and chewy, and you work it slowly with your teeth, letting it soften before you swallow. The taste is mild and slightly salty, a plain flavor that requires no attention, and you eat the rest of the piece in the same slow, methodical way, breaking off small fragments and chewing each one thoroughly. Once bread is finished, you take a sip of water from your personal skin, just enough to moisten your mouth, and you replace the stopper with care. The water is still lukewarm, but it is clean and it does its work, and that is all that matters. Around you, the hollow is settling into its own kind of stillness. The camels are all resting now, their breathing synchronizing into a collective rhythm that is deeper and slower than the rhythm of walking. Some of them have closed their eyes completely, their long lashes resting on their dusty cheeks, while others are watching the swirling storm with a placid, unconcerned gaze. The other travelers have found their own spots around the hollow, some sitting, some lying down with their cloaks pulled over them, all of them waiting with the same patient acceptance that you feel in yourself. The storm is a condition of the journey, like the heat or the distance, and there is nothing to do but let it pass. You look up and notice that the light has changed again. The pale ivory disk of the sun has moved further westward, and its light now filters through the dust clouds at a lower angle, tinting the air a deep, warm gold. The color is beautiful in a muted, subdued way, like the light inside an old tent made of thin fabric. It casts no shadows, only a general radiance that seems to come from all directions at once, and it gives the hollow a sense of enclosure and intimacy that the open desert never has. You watch the golden light play over the curved walls of the hollow, picking out the small ripples and contours that you would not notice in full daylight, and you let yourself appreciate the simple beauty of the moment without needing to name it or remember it. The wind continues its work overhead, but down in the hollow the air remains calm and still. The sand that does make it over the ridge falls lightly, not in a driving blast, but in a gentle vertical drift, like snow made of dust. The particles settle on the camels' backs and on your cloak and on the loads, a fine pale coating that accumulates so slowly you can barely see it happening. You brush a layer of dust from your sleeve and watch it fall to the ground, where it joins the dust that is already there, and the gesture is so small and inconsequential that it feels like a kind of meditation, a tiny action performed for its own sake. You settle deeper into your position against the saddle and let your breathing slow to match the camel's rhythm. Your body feels heavy and relaxed, the accumulated fatigue of the long morning walk now catching up with you in the stillness. You are not sleepy, not in the sense of needing to close your eyes and drift away, but you are in a state of profound rest, a quiet alertness that asks nothing of you. Your thoughts come and go like the gusts of wind above the ridge, each one rising up, swirling for a moment, and then dissipating into the general calm. You think about the oasis you will reach when the storm passes, but the thought is distant and without urgency. You think about the track you have followed, the acacia grove, the valley of dunes, and these memories too are distant, a series of images that flicker and fade. You are here, now, in the hollow, and that is the only thing that exists. One of the camels shifts its weight with a soft grunt, and the sound draws your attention back to the present. You open your eyes and look around the hollow, checking each animal in turn. They are all as they were, resting comfortably, their flanks rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. The dust continues to fall, the wind continues to hum, the golden light continues to fade by imperceptible degrees as the sun makes its way toward the horizon. Everything is as it should be, and you close your eyes again and let the stillness wrap around you like a blanket, warm and heavy and endlessly patient. The storm will pass in its own time, and when it does, you will rise and continue the journey. But for now there is only the hollow and the quiet and the long, slow breath of the waiting desert. The storm reaches its deepest phase without any announcement, moving from a steady blow to a complete envelopment so gradually that you cannot identify the exact moment when the outside world disappeared. One moment you could still make out the vague shape of the ridge against the dusty sky, and the next moment there is no ridge, no sky, no horizon at all, only a uniform grey-brown haze that presses in from every direction. The air has become a single substance, neither fully gas nor fully solid, a suspension of fine particles that floats rather than flies, filling your vision with a soft, moving curtain that never settles. It is like being inside a cloud made of silk and earth, a cloud that breathes and shifts but never parts. You sit very still and let this new condition settle around you, observing it with the same calm attention you have given to every other phase of the journey. The noise is the first thing you notice in this altered world. It is not a roar anymore, not the rushing, gusting sound of wind driving sand against the ridge. It has mellowed into a continuous hush, a vast, soft shushing that comes from everywhere at once, as if the entire desert has been wrapped in a layer of thick wool. The individual grains of sand are so numerous and so fine that their collective impact merges into a single steady note, a whisper amplified to the scale of a landscape. You can hear it passing over the hollow, over the camels, over your own motionless form, a sound without beginning or end that fills your ears and then overflows them, spilling into your chest and your bones until it becomes a physical sensation, a gentle pressure that holds you in place. Beneath this all-encompassing hush, the smaller sounds of the hollow persist, but they are distant now, as if heard through water. The breathing of the camels is a low, rhythmic drone that rises and falls in slow waves, each inhalation drawing in some of the suspended dust, each exhalation stirring it away again. The creak of a saddle when an animal shifts its weight is a brief, muted groan that fades immediately into the general hum. The rustle of your own cloak when you turn your head is a scratch of sound so faint that it barely registers. You have the sense that noise itself has become a finite resource, and the storm is using most of it, leaving only the smallest portion for the living things huddled in the hollow. You decide to move. The decision is not driven by any need or urgency, but by the simple recognition that your body has been still for a long time and a small movement would be pleasant. You rise from your seat against the saddle, uncurling your legs with slow deliberation, feeling the stiffness in your knees and the way the sand has packed itself into the folds of your clothing. The sand that has accumulated on your shoulders and the top of your head slides off as you stand, a soft cascade that joins the general drift. You take a moment to shake out your cloak, holding it away from your body and letting the fabric flap once, twice, releasing a cloud of dust that immediately merges with the air and becomes indistinguishable from it. The gesture is almost symbolic, a small act of maintenance in a world where maintenance has become the only possible activity. You move from camel to camel, your feet finding the packed sand of the hollow floor with the confidence of long familiarity. The visibility is so reduced that you can only see one animal at a time. The rest are shapes in the murk, their outlines softened and blurred until they seem like stones or mounds of earth. You reach the first camel by memory and by the sound of its breathing, your hand finding the warm curve of its shoulder before your eyes can confirm what you already know. The animal does not startle at your touch. It has been aware of your approach through the vibrations in the sand, and it accepts your presence with the same placid calm it has shown all day. You run your palm along its neck, feeling the coarse hair and the solid muscle beneath, and you check the girth strap by sliding your fingers under the leather to confirm that it is not too tight. The strap is warm and slightly damp from the animal's body heat, and it yields just enough to your touch to assure you that the camel is comfortable. You speak a few quiet words into its ear, words that have no meaning but carry a tone of reassurance, and you move on. The next camel is the young one, and it is less settled than the others. You find it shifting its weight from side to side, its head raised, its ears swiveling to catch the sounds of the storm. You place your hand on its forehead, a broad, flat surface of bone covered in short, velvety hair, and you hold it there with a steady, patient pressure. The camel leans into your hand, and after a moment its nervous movement subsides. You check its harness with extra care, making sure that no sand has worked its way under the saddle pad, that no strap has twisted, that the load is still balanced evenly on its back. Everything is in order, and you give the animal a final pat before leaving it. It settles back onto its chest with a soft grunt, and its breathing gradually slows to match the rhythm of the older animals. You continue down the line, visiting each camel in turn. The ritual is slow and unhurried, each check taking as long as it needs to take, and you find a quiet satisfaction in the work. It gives a shape to the shapeless passage of time inside the storm, a series of small, purposeful actions that string together into a kind of progress. By the time you reach the last camel and confirm that it too is well, a measurable interval has passed, and you have the sense of having accomplished something, even if that something is only the maintenance of an already stable situation. You stand at the edge of the group for a moment, looking into the swirling opacity that surrounds you, and then you turn and walk back to your place near the lead camel. You sit down again, but this time you do not lean against the saddle. Instead, you lower yourself to the sand and cross your legs, resting your hands on your knees. The sand is cool now, the heat of the day having dissipated into the storm, and it feels pleasant against your palms. You close your eyes and let the hush of the wind fill your awareness, a continuous soothing sound that has no variation and no end. Your breathing slows to match the camel's rhythm, and for a while you simply exist, a point of stillness within the greater stillness, not thinking, not planning, not waiting for anything except the storm's eventual passing. After a time, you open your eyes and reach for the water skin that lies beside you. You pour a small amount of water into the wooden bowl that you use for the camels, and you carry the bowl to the lit camel, holding it under his chin so that he can drink. The camel lowers his head and laps at the water with his long, thick tongue, each lap a slow, deliberate motion that scoops the liquid into his mouth. You watch the water level drop by tiny increments, and when the bowl is empty, you refill it and offer it to the next camel. You repeat this process for each animal, moving down the line with the same patient rhythm, and the camels drink with the same unhurried gratitude, their eyes half closed, their throats working in steady swallows. When the last camel has drunk, you pour a little water into your own cup and drink it yourself, holding it in your mouth to warm it before swallowing, exactly as you did at dawn. The water duty complete, you check the larger storage skins, the ones that hang from the saddles. You touch each one, feeling the plumpness that indicates a full volume, and you confirm that the stoppers are tight and the stitching intact. The skins are holding up well, their leather still damp and cool to the touch, and you estimate that you have more than enough water to last through the storm and the remainder of the journey. The knowledge is a quiet comfort, a small practical reassurance that sits in the back of your mind and asks for no attention. You return to your sitting place and take a piece of flatbread from your pouch, the same bread you ate from earlier, and you break off a small corner and place it in your mouth. The bread is even drier now, its edges hard and crumbly, but the taste is still mild and slightly salty, a plain flavor that requires no comment. You chew slowly, letting the bread soften on your tongue before you swallow, and you take your time with each bite. There is no reason to hurry. The storm is not going anywhere, neither are you. When the bread is finished, you brush the crumbs from your lap and watch them fall into the sand, where they are immediately covered by the fine dust that continues to settle from the air. The dust covers everything, a slow, patient accumulation that will erase all traces of your presence by the time the storm is over. You find this thought neither sad nor comforting. It is simply the way of the desert, the way of wind and sand and time. You study the weave of your cloak, which is draped over your knees, and you notice details that you have not noticed before. The wool is a warm brown, the color of earth after rain, and it is woven in a tight, even pattern of horizontal and vertical threads. The threads are slightly uneven in places, the hand of the weaver visible in the occasional thicker strand or the subtle shift in tension, and you trace these irregularities with your fingertip, feeling the rough texture and the tiny ridges where one thread crosses another. The cloak has been mended in several places, the repairs done with a slightly darker thread that stands out against the original fabric if you look closely. You examine each mend, noting the neat stitches and the way the patches have been integrated into the weave, and you think about the person who made these repairs, perhaps your own hand many months ago, perhaps the hand of someone else whose work you now carry with you. The examination of your cloak leads naturally to an examination of your other garments. You look at the cuff of your sleeve, where the fabric is frayed from rubbing against your wrist, and you smooth the loose threads with your thumb. You look at the hem of your robe, which is stiff with accumulated dust and beginning to show signs of wear along the edge. You look at the leather of your sandals, the straps that cross your instep, the way the leather has darkened with age and use, the small crack near the toe of the left sandal that you will need to repair when you reach the next settlement. All these small details absorb your attention for a time, and you examine them with the same calm, methodical care that you have applied to the camels and the water skins and the loads. The maintenance of equipment is a form of respect, you believe, a way of honoring the things that keep you alive. While you were examining your sandal, you notice that a tiny dune has begun to build against the side of your boot. The sand grains are so fine that they drift rather than blow, carried by the faint eddies that circulate inside the hollow, and they are accumulating in the lee of your foot, just as larger dunes accumulate in the lee of the ridge. The dune is perhaps the height of your little finger, its crest a sharp line that shifts and reforms as each new grain settles. You watch this process for a long time, fascinated by the miniature landscape that is growing beside you. A grain lands on the windward slope and rolls down to the base, where it joins the others. Another grain lands on the crest and stays there, adding a tiny increment to the height. The dune grows grain by grain, a slow, steady construction that mirrors the larger processes of the desert outside. You do not disturb it, you simply watch. Your breathing shallow so as not to disturb the air, and you let the small dune teach you patience. Time passes, and you have no way of measuring it. The light inside the storm is unchanging, a diffuse, directionless glow that could be morning or afternoon or the last hour before sunset. You have lost track of how long you have been sitting in the hollow, just as you have lost track of the number of breaths you have taken, or the number of grains that have accumulated on your boot. The past and the future have dissolved, leaving only an endless present that stretches in all directions without edges. You are not bored. Boredom requires a desire for something different, and you have no such desire. You are simply present, your attention moving from one small detail to the next, your body still and rested, your mind quiet and calm. At some point you pour another cup of water and drink it, and then you pour a little more for the camels. You check the girth straps again, even though you know they have not changed, and you brush a layer of dust from the led camel's saddle. You pick up a handful of sand and let it run through your fingers, watching the grains fall in the thin, steady stream that dissipates before it hits the ground. You adjust the folds of your headscarf, tucking a loose end under your chin. You do all these things with the same slow, deliberate attention, and each action is complete in itself, asking for nothing beyond its own performance. The storm continues, the hush continues, the sand continues to fall, and you continue to wait. The heart of the stillness is not an absence of movement or sound. It is a quality of acceptance, a willingness to be exactly where you are for as long as necessary. You feel that quality in yourself now, a deep, settled calm that has no conditions and no limits. The storm will pass when it passes, and until then, there is only the hollow and the camels and the quiet work of waiting. You rest your hands on your knees and close your eyes, and you let the long, slow breath of the desert carry you forward into the endless, peaceful center of the storm. The change comes so slowly that it arrives without a beginning. You do not notice the wind easing, because easing implies a series of comparisons, and the present moment is the only moment you have. What you notice instead is a subtle shift in the quality of the light, a barely perceptible brightening that seems to come from within the dust itself, rather than from any external source. The uniform grey-brown that has filled your vision for so long now thins by a fraction, allowing you to see the outline of the nearest camel with slightly more clarity than before. The animal's ear, which was a vague shape a moment ago, now has a discernible edge, a line of darkness against the pale haze. You watch this edge for a while, and you realize that it is becoming sharper, that the world is slowly coming back into focus. You remain still, your hands resting on your knees, your breathing slow and even. The hush of the storm continues, but it has lost some of its density, some of its all-consuming presence. It is still a constant sound, but it is no longer the only sound. You can hear the camels breathing more clearly now, each exhale a soft puff that cuts through the background murmur, and you can hear the faint rustle of your own clothing as you shift your weight slightly. The air is still full of suspended particles, but they are beginning to settle, the heavier grains falling first, the lighter ones continuing to drift, but with less urgency. It is as if the entire atmosphere is growing tired, releasing its hold on the sand grain by grain. You wait, because waiting is what you have been doing, and the change requires no action from you. The brightening continues, a slow, steady increase in illumination that spreads from the eastern sky, where the sun has been making its way toward the horizon. The light is no longer the flat, directionless grey of the storm's heart, but a pale yellow glow that seems to seep through the dust clouds like water through cloth. It casts faint shadows now, long and indistinct, that stretch across the hollow floor and give the space a sense of depth it has lacked for hours. The bowl of the hollow reappears, its walls emerging from the murk as darker shapes against the lighter sky, and you can see the ridge behind you, its crest a solid line that cuts across the northern horizon. The wind continues to ease. The gusts that drove the sand against the ridge are now only intermittent, separated by longer and longer intervals of relative calm. During these calms, the airborne sand thins dramatically, and you can see further, perhaps 50 paces, perhaps 100. The landscape beyond the hollow is being revealed in stages, like a painting slowly uncovered. First the nearest dune, its slope covered in fresh ripples. Then the next dune, its crest sharp against the brightening sky. Then the distant ridge, the one you were aiming for before the storm, still visible, still in the same place. The sight of that ridge, unchanged and familiar, brings a quiet sense of confirmation, a small solid anchor in a world that has been temporarily dissolved. You feel a movement beside you, and you turn to see the led camel lifting its head. The animal has sensed the change as well, its body responding to the shift in pressure and light with the same instinctive wisdom that has guided it through every stage of the journey. It blinks slowly, its long lashes brushing away the accumulated dust, and it looks at you with its calm, dark eyes. You meet its gaze and hold it for a moment, a wordless communication that passes between you, and then you rise to your feet. The sand that has piled against your legs falls away in soft slabs, and you stand for a moment, letting your body adjust to the vertical after so many hours of stillness. Your joints protest mildly, a dull ache in your knees and lower back that is not pain, but simply the memory of rest. You shake your cloak, holding it out from your body and flapping the fabric in a series of slow, deliberate motions. The dust that has settled into the weave rises in soft plumes, each shake producing a cloud of pale brown that drifts away on the weakening breeze. You shake your headscarf next, pulling it free and whipping it gently through the air until the fabric is clean and light again. Then you run your fingers through your hair, loosening the particles that have worked their way close to your scalp, and you feel the grit under your nails, a fine, dry residue that will take a proper wash to fully remove. The sensation is not unpleasant. It is the texture of the journey, the proof of the storm you have weathered. The other travelers are stirring as well, rising from their resting places and beginning the same process of shaking and brushing. No one speaks much, but there are a few quiet words exchanged, observations about the clearing sky and the condition of the animals. The mood is calm and unhurried, the same patient acceptance that marked the beginning of the storm now marking its end. You walk among the camels, checking each one as it begins to stir, and you see that they have weathered the storm with the same quiet resilience they show to everything. Their coats are thick with dust, their eyelashes crusted, but their eyes are clear and their breathing is steady. You brush the worst of the dust from their faces with your palm, a gentle sweeping motion that they accept without flinching. The camels begin to rise as the wind drops further. The lead camel goes first, unfolding its long legs with the same creaking, joint-by-joint motion that you have watched so many times, and it stands tall against the clearing sky, its head turning to survey the altered landscape. The other camels follow in sequence, a slow cascade of rising bodies that fills the hollow with the soft thud of feet planting on sand and the rustle of shifting loads. You check each girt strap as the animals stand, tightening the ones that have loosened during the rest, loosening the ones that have become too tight, and you confirm that the saddle pads are still evenly positioned. The young camel, the one that was nervous earlier, rises with only a slight hesitation, and you steady it with a hand on its shoulder until it is fully upright and balanced. When all the camels are standing, you turn your attention to the loads. The water skins are still secure, their stoppers still tight, their leather still cool and damp to the touch. The date baskets have shifted slightly on one animal, and you rebalance them, lifting the heavier side and adjusting the ropes until the weight is evenly distributed. The trade bundles are intact, their wrappings coated with dust but otherwise unchanged. You work your way down the line, checking each item with the same methodical care you applied during the halt, and you find nothing amiss. The caravan is ready, or nearly ready, and the knowledge settles into you with a quiet satisfaction. The air continues to clear. The sun is low in the western sky now, its disk visible through the thinning haze as a pale, watery circle of light. The clouds of dust that obscured the horizon have lifted, revealing a sky that is washed out and clean, a very pale blue that deepens toward the east, where the first stars will soon appear. The landscape has changed in the way that landscapes always change after a storm. The dunes have shifted, their crests moved a few paces eastward, their windward faces scoured smooth, and their leeward slopes piled high with fresh, soft sand. The track you were following is gone, erased completely, but that does not matter because the track was never more than a suggestion, and you know the way by other means. You climb to the top of the ridge, the same ridge that sheltered you, and you stand at its crest to survey the full extent of the transformation. The desert stretches out in all directions, a sea of pale gold and soft grey under the clearing sky, its contours subtly rearranged but fundamentally the same. You scan the horizon, looking for landmarks, and you find them one by one. The low ridge you were aiming for is still visible, its dark shape unchanged against the eastern sky. Beyond it, so faint that it might be a trick of the tired eyes, you can see the blue-grey silhouette of a distant mountain range, a chain of ancient peaks that marks the edge of the desert and the beginning of the settled lands. The sight of those mountains, which you have not seen since the morning, is a welcome confirmation, a sign that your internal compass has remained true. You orient yourself by the angle of the sun, which is now perhaps 2 hours from setting, and by the shape of the distant mountains. Your sense of direction, honed by years of travel, tells you that the next oasis lies slightly to the east of the mountains, a half-day's journey if the walking is good. You know the route, a gradual descent from this ridge into a broad, gravelly plain, then a slow climb over a series of low hills, and finally the approach to the oasis itself, where the palm trees will appear on the horizon as a dark smudge that slowly resolves into individual fronds. You have made this journey many times, and your body knows the distance in its bones, the number of steps, the number of breaths, the number of times the sun will shift its position before you arrive. You return to the hollow and find the caravan assembled and waiting. The camels are standing in a loose group, their heads turned toward you, their bodies patient and still. The other travelers are mounted or standing beside their animals, their faces calm, their eyes on the horizon. No one asks when you will leave or where you will go. They trust your guidance, and they know that the journey will resume when it is time. You pick up the lead rope and coil it loosely in your hand, feeling the familiar weight and texture, and you take your place at the front of the line. The lead camel watches you with its calm, dark eyes, and then it lowers its head slightly, a gesture of readiness, of acceptance. You take the first step out of the hollow, your foot sinking slightly into the fresh sand that is piled at the entrance, and then you are on the open desert again, the caravan stringing out behind you in a long, patient line. The wind has dropped to a gentle breeze, barely strong enough to stir the hem of your cloak, and the air is cool and clean, washed of its dust by the storm's passing. The sky overhead is a pale, clear dome, its blue deepening with each passing minute, and the first stars are beginning to appear in the east, tiny points of light that flicker and steady as you watch. You walk toward those stars, toward the distant mountains, toward the oasis that waits somewhere beyond the horizon, and the caravan follows in its steady, unhurried rhythm, resuming the journey as if it had never paused. The departure from the hollow is a quiet, unhurried affair, a slow unfurling of the caravan from its sheltered rest into the open desert. You lead the way up the gentle slope that marks the edge of the bowl, your sandals pressing into the fresh, cool sand that the storm has deposited in soft, even layers. The lead camel follows without hesitation, its head lifting as it clears the rim and faces the vast expanse of the cooling world. Behind you the other camels ascend one by one, their bodies silhouetted against the pale, washed-out sky, and then the whole caravan is strung out along the ridge, a line of dark shapes moving in single file toward the eastern horizon. The wind has died completely now, leaving an immense stillness that feels almost solid, and the only sounds are the soft thud of camel pads on sand and the faint creak of leather that has begun to cool in the evening air. You turn your face to the west and see the sun descending toward the horizon, a great golden disk that has lost the harsh whiteness of midday and now glows with a deep amber warmth. The clouds of dust that filled the sky have settled, leaving behind a clarity that makes the distant dunes appear sharp and distinct, their edges outlined in light. The color of the sand is changing as the sun drops lower, shifting from pale gold to a richer, deeper ochre, and the shadows are stretching out again, long and thin, pointing eastward like dark fingers. Your own shadow walks ahead of you now, a tall, striding figure that moves with the same steady rhythm as your body, and the camel's shadows stretch out beside it, a procession of elongated shapes that seem to flow over the sand like water. The air cools with remarkable speed once the sun touches the horizon. You feel the change on your face and hands, a gradual withdrawal of warmth that leaves the skin tingling slightly, and you adjust your cloak so that it covers your shoulders more fully. The wool, which felt heavy and oppressively warm during the afternoon, now feels comforting, a layer of insulation against the creeping chill. The camels seem to welcome the change as well. Their pace quickens by a barely perceptible degree, their strides lengthening as the cooler air invigorates them. You feel the shift through the lead rope, a subtle increase in tension and release, and you adjust your own pace to match, walking with a slightly longer stride that covers the ground more efficiently. The sunset unfolds in slow, deliberate stages, a spectacle that you have witnessed hundreds of times but never tire of watching. The golden disk sinks lower and lower, its lower edge touching the rim of the desert, and the sky around it erupts in a symphony of color. Bands of orange and pink and deep, fiery red spread outward from the sun, fading into softer shades of lavender and pale violet, higher up, and the entire western sky becomes a canvas of warm, glowing hues that seem almost too beautiful to be real. The sand reflects these colors, taking on a rosy tint that makes the desert look like a landscape painted in pastels. Every dune a soft, rounded form of pink and gold. You walk through this beauty without pausing, letting it wash over you, and you feel a quiet sense of gratitude that is too deep for words. The sun disappears entirely, its last sliver of light slipping below the horizon, and the world is plunged into the brief, luminous interval of twilight. The colors in the west deepen and then begin to fade, the bright oranges mellowing to dusky rose and then to a muted gray-blue. The sky overhead retains a faint pearly glow, the last remnant of the departed sun, and it is in this glow that the first stars begin to appear. They emerge one by one, tiny pinpricks of light that flicker and then steady, scattered across the eastern sky like seeds sown by an invisible hand. You watch them appear without naming them, simply noting their positions and the patterns they form, and you feel the familiar sense of orientation that comes with the arrival of the night sky. The twilight deepens into true darkness, and the stars multiply. The pale blue of the sky darkens to a deep, velvety indigo, and the stars become brighter and more numerous, filling the heavens with a cold silver light that seems to shimmer and dance if you look at it too long. The Milky Way appears as a broad, misty band that stretches from north to south, a river of stars so dense that it looks like a cloud, and you trace its course with your eyes, using it as a reference for the direction you must travel. You have known the night sky since you were a child, and you can read it as easily as you read the sand. There is the constellation of the camel, its long neck stretching toward the eastern horizon. There is the traveler's star, bright and steady, which always points the way home. You steer by these celestial markers now, adjusting your course by small degrees, and the caravan follows your lead with the same trust it has shown all day. The sand underfoot begins to glow faintly in the starlight. It is not a bright glow, but a subtle luminescence, a pale silvery sheen that makes the dunes look as though they are covered in a light dusting of frost. The light is just enough to see by, enough to distinguish the shape of the ground and the contours of the landscape, and you walk with the same confidence you had in full daylight. The camel's pads leave dark impressions in the glowing sand, impressions that fill slowly with shadow, and the trail of the caravan stretches back into the darkness like a line of writing that only the stars can read. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the faint mineral scent of cooling stone and the dry sweetness of distant plants, and with each breath you feel the last remnants of the day's heat leaving your body. The night deepens, and the desert becomes a place of profound quiet. The sounds of the caravan, which were muffled by the storm and then by the wind, are now crisp and distinct in the still air. You hear the soft crunch of sand under your sandals, the rhythmic thud of camel pads, the occasional jingle of a halter ring, the quiet exhale of the led camel as it walks. These sounds are no longer absorbed by the vastness around them. They ring out clearly and then fade, each one a small, perfect note in the silence of the night. You listen to them as you walk, and they become a kind of music, a steady, repetitive rhythm that soothes the mind and lulls it into a state of calm awareness. The camels walk with renewed vigor in the cool night air. Their strides are longer and more purposeful, their heads held higher, and their breathing is deep and regular. The rest in the hollow and the cooler temperatures have restored their energy, and they move with a quiet enthusiasm that is almost palpable. You feel their eagerness through the lead rope, a gentle, insistent pull that urges you forward, and you allow yourself to match their pace, walking with a longer stride that eats up the miles. The distance that seemed so vast during the heat of the day now feels manageable, and you know that you will reach the oasis before dawn if you maintain this speed. You pass through a landscape that is transformed by the night. The dunes, which were golden and welcoming in the sunlight, are now silver and mysterious, their shapes softened and blurred by the darkness. The ridges that you navigated by during the day are harder to see, but you know where they are, and you steer around them by memory and by the stars. The gravel plains, which were hot and glaring under the midday sun, are now cool and dark, their stones glinting faintly in the starlight like scattered chips of ice. The silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat, a steady, reassuring rhythm that keeps time with your steps. After a long while, you notice a change in the air. It is a subtle change, a shift in the quality of the breeze that you might not have detected if you had not been paying attention. The air, which has been dry and cool all night, now carries a faint hint of moisture, a soft, green scent that speaks of living things and standing water. You breathe deeply, and the scent grows stronger, filling your nostrils with the unmistakable perfume of an oasis. It is the smell of damp earth and palm fronds and flowering plants, a rich, complex aroma that seems almost out of place in the arid desert, and it tells you that you are close. The camels smell it too. Their heads lift and their nostrils flare, and their pace quickens by a visible degree, their strides becoming more urgent. You let them pull you forward, and you walk with a new lightness in your step, the fatigue of the long night temporarily forgotten. The sky ahead begins to lighten, the deep indigo of the night fading to a paler blue, and the stars that were so bright an hour ago begin to dim. The eastern horizon takes on a soft grey glow, and against that glow you see a dark line on the horizon, a smudge of deeper darkness that gradually resolves into the silhouettes of palm trees. The sight of those trees, their fronds etched against the brightening sky, fills you with a quiet sense of completion. You have travelled a long way, through heat and storm and darkness, and now the journey is almost over. You do not quicken your pace. You simply continue walking, your eyes fixed on the dark line of the oasis, and you let the anticipation of arrival settle into you like a gentle warmth. The oasis grows larger and more distinct as you approach. The dark smudge becomes a line of individual trees, their trunks tall and slender, their fronds spreading outward in graceful arching curves. Below the trees you can see the glint of water, a patch of silver that reflects the pale light of the dawn sky. The smell of water and vegetation is very strong now, filling the air with a freshness that is almost intoxicating, and you breathe it in deeply, letting it cleanse the dust from your lungs. The camels are walking faster now, their eagerness barely contained, and you hear a low, rumbling sound from the lead camel, a sound of anticipation and recognition. The other camels answer with similar sounds, and the whole caravan seems to surge forward with renewed energy. You reach the edge of the oasis, just as the first direct light of the rising sun touches the tops of the palm trees. The light is soft and golden, a gentle radiance that tones the fronds from dark green to a brilliant, luminous emerald, and it spills down through the branches to dapple the ground with shifting patterns of light and shadow. The pond at the center of the oasis is a sheet of still, dark water, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the palms and the sky with perfect clarity. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers, and the sound of birdsong fills the trees, a chorus of small, sweet notes that seems to welcome you home. You lead the caravan to the water's edge and stop. The camels need no command. They walk forward and lower their heads to drink, their great tongues lapping at the water with slow, deliberate motions. You watch them for a moment, seeing the dust of the journey wash away from their muscles, seeing the water drip from their chins, and you feel a quiet satisfaction in their well-being. Then you kneel down on the damp sand at the edge of the pond, your knees pressing into the cool, moist ground, and you cup your hands together and lower them into the water. The water is cool and clear, and you lift it to your lips and drink, letting it fill your mouth and flow down your throat. It tastes of minerals and earth and life, and you drink deeply, feeling the water spread through your body and wash away the dryness and the dust and the fatigue. When you have drunk your fill, you sit back on your heels and look around at the oasis, at the palms and the pond and the camels and the soft golden light of the new day, and you know that you have arrived.